before we welcome our first panel, I'd like to welcome to the screen Nicole Ruppersberg, who's a producer in HEFF, who recently joined our team since the last HEFF. And I've got things popping up on my window here. I got to put it down. But hey, Nicole, see, I get back and forth. What's going on? Nicole's coming into us from Las Vegas. How you doing, Nicole?
I'm good. Thank you. Hi, I'm Nicole Ruppersberg, producer of the Higher Ed Facilities Forum, and thank you all so much for joining us today. To kick things off, we've got what I've been calling a powerhouse panel, and that's no exaggeration. These speakers will discuss the current state of higher ed facilities and where we go from here. The participants on this panel have a wealth of valuable and insightful information to share. And the tragedy is we only have an hour to do it. So it's going to go fast. So let's get to it right after this commercial break. And welcome back. I'd like to introduce Pete Zura, Vice President of Market Strategy and Development at Gordian, who will be moderating this discussion. Gordian is a longtime supporter of the Higher Ed Facilities Forum from the very beginning. We always love having them involved because they themselves create and support such great content. Pete has orchestrated an incredibly robust conversation that's going to hit on a lot of pertinent topics. So I'll let him get right to it. Take it away, Pete.
Well, thank you, Nicole. Really appreciate it. It's a privilege to be here. I want to first actually ask each of my colleagues to introduce themselves to you because we are going to sprint through a number of topics and we won't have time. So maybe Karren, Jessica, Chris, and Mohamed, in that order, can we go through and just have you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Karren Bee-Donohoe. I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Capital Facilities for the entire SUNY System, a 64 campus system.
Facilities, operations, and planning for the University of Miami.
Hi, Chris Kopach. I'm Assistant Vice President at the University of Arizona. We have about 12 million square feet, about 60,000 students, faculty, and staff. I'm also have been elevated to the incident commander during our pandemic.
Hi, I'm Mohamed Attalla. I'm the Executive Director at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. We are a fairly good size campus with about 24 million square feet of properties, over 300 buildings, and we operate about 5,000 acres of land.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to take what I promised to be only 90 seconds to look backwards so that then this group can spend some time looking forward. And so in order to do that, I'm going to show just a few slides here really quickly. And the first slide is here talking about what we would have been discussing if this was a year ago. At the same time, we'd be talking about the fact that there's an enrollment cliff coming, and we'd be discussing the concerns we have on revenue tied to that enrollment cliff that's affecting everyone differently around the country, and maybe changes in state funding that would be happening, and the inevitable impact that was going to be having on actual facility spending. And the only thing heading upward is the need, the demands the buildings were continuing to place. And that would not have surprised anybody. In addition, we would have been thinking about a number of other issues that are at play, issues around debt, issues around availability of the workforce, concerns about student mental health of late, the changes in international student population and demand, and certainly whether it was last fall or in through this last year, we'd be taking on issues of equity and social justice. So it would have been a very robust conversation that had nothing to do with the virus, which has taken over our lives since March and has transformed the conversations about everything we do, and certainly made for a wild 6 months planning to try to bring schools back online this fall. A situation which, as of earlier this week, per this graph, is continuing to be a concern and a growing concern around the country. So we are going to spend our time not necessarily looking back, but trying to think about these topics What are some of the carry forward lessons from COVID? What are we doing to reassess space? What are everyone's thoughts about capital planning? What has happened with facility leader visibility, and what are the things that should be considered in that regard? Maybe some expense reduction, or maybe optimization is a better word, and revenue generation, and then certainly some questions along the way from the audience. Excited to have that conversation, so let's get into it. I wanted to ask the four of you each to share a little bit about maybe a strategy that you employed, or some kind of learning that happened in the last 6, 8, 9 months that you see as a carry forward, something you're going to take with you as a leader, as a department, as an institution, that really only could have come to light on your campuses because of the virus. And maybe we start with Karren.
So great, thank you, Pete. So what I will be describing is actually a particular strategy that SUNY implemented to deal with the financial challenges that are being brought about by COVID. Similar to many campuses, the SUNY Residence Hall program is financially self-sufficient with no funding support from the state. In the SUNY program, there are 495 buildings, 76,000 beds, $550 million in annual revenue, and an outstanding debt of $1.9 billion. In other words, it's a massive program. So when COVID hit in March, SUNY chose not to bring students back to the campus after spring break, and that led to refunds of over $130 million, resulting in a one-year loss of $65 million. It was clear something had to be done. So working with bankers and the Dormitory Authority of the state of New York, a debt restructuring was proposed. This process is affectionately known as scoop and chuck. And if you can share the slide, that would be great. So the restructuring took the debt that is owed for the fiscal years ending June 21 and June 22, as shown by the dotted green bars, scooped that debt and chucked it out to subsequent years, as shown by the orange bars sitting atop of the existing debt. This was done by issuing $328 million in new bonds. The cash from that sale is now held in escrow and will be used to pay the debt service for the 21 and 22 fiscal years. Well, this means that the revenue received by the campuses for this year and next doesn't have to go toward that debt service, but rather can be used for operating expenses. And if things go better next year, the revenue that would have gone to next year's debt service will be available to be used for future capital improvements. But in the meantime, only capital projects already under construction have been allowed to progress because we are unsure when additional bonding will be possible. SUNY's restructuring plan was classified as a prudent move by rating agencies, though we received clear warnings. This is a one-time opportunity not to be repeated. And this short-term solution comes at a long-term price of over $133 million in new interest over the 20 years of this new debt. And it pushed the overall program debt much closer to the maximum allowable debt service, or MADS, that was shown by the red line in that graph. Future bonding for new capital improvements will be limited, therefore, by this restructuring action. Of course, campuses are looking for operational savings, though opportunities are limited by a strong union protection for workers in New York State. This was a drastic measure in a desperate situation, but it assures SUNY continues to meet the required payments on $1.9 billion in existing debt and will continue to operate a first-class residential program. Pete?
It's such an interesting rethinking of finances, but it also demonstrates the ways in which you're getting really close to the limits, right? It's pushing everybody close to the limits on a number of things. Chris, you had made a comment about the way in which you're connecting and coming together, right? The same way that DASNY and the bankers and everybody's coming together. Have you thought more about that whole connection that you're making as a community there on campus?
Thank you very much. You know, as I mentioned, at the University of Arizona, we have 12 million square feet on campus, just on the main campus. We spread throughout the entire state of Arizona and beyond. And the pandemic, like all of us, has created many challenges, whether it's financial, how do we keep our staff employed, whether it's our residents' life, whether it's their student unions, and whether it's our buildings, and with the challenges we had before. But what a great opportunity it has given our facility staff, our leaders, never in my entire career has our facilities management department been so important, from our custodial staff to our grounds, to our maintenance team, to the folks who are in the warehouse, as it is now. And what's happened is, from our germ busters, as I affectionately call them, as we train them up in isolation procedures, and we've had over 230 cases of presumed or positive cases of COVID that they've done. Our testing research that is just outstanding, and it's given the opportunity of facilities management to partner, no silos. Everybody is here for a common goal. In our case, take care of the University of Arizona, take care of our students, financially get the campus back up and running. We are currently in stage 2, which allows us to go ahead and have at least 30 students within our classrooms. We've been very successful with our testing program, but the ability of facilities management leaders to have definitely a seat at the table. As I mentioned, we brought in the 17 Surgeon General to set up an incident command team. And then what we did, they asked me to go ahead and sit in as logistics chief. And then as we transitioned it all to an in-house, I was asked to go ahead and take over as the commander of our incident command. And like all our universities, who has that special knowledge of our campus? It's our facilities leaders. Who has the utility infrastructure, the cleaning, how important. We've always cleaned for health in our buildings years ago, and never has it been so important as it is now. But the collaborative effort, the team effort, and that saying I always use, the team, the team, the team. And the team at the University of Arizona has come together, from researchers to faculty to students, to really come together as one. Never has it been so important as it has been now. Thank you.
That's really excellent, excellent. And Mohamed, some takeaways from you. I know you were talking a lot about space and just an awareness, right? That awareness that's coming with people seeing how important and relevant things are, the way Chris was describing.
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. For a long time in higher education, I think we all know that the two most expensive commodities in higher education were considered to be free commodities, and that we're talking about space and energy. So for the long time in the past, we've as a community considered the light and the steam and heating and cooling and the space that we occupy is free, and we use, and we always ask for more of it. And in fact, they are two very expensive commodities. And many higher education organizations have started now to look at the responsibility-centered management and activity-based management, for another name, to be able to assign responsibility and distribute the finances and take for consideration space and energy. So through the pandemic, that has brought those issues to light, where you have this huge inventory of vacant space that needed to be heated and cooled as well. And so from there, a new perspective, I would say, have been driven. And in my own opinion, that higher education moving forward will be changed for quite some time, to look at space and energy and reconsider space and whether we need that much space. We now have experienced remote working arrangements, and we looked at this experience and we found that certain segments within the institution, certain functions can in fact operate efficiently and with an effective manner remotely. So that will be a consideration moving to the future, whether we need to really maintain this inventory of space we have. So that's one big piece if we're talking about lessons learned. But the other one piece I wish to mention and spoke about before is the rebranding, or the need for a facility service organization. In the past, it was, really facilities were taken for granted and, considered that it's just a service there, and we remember facilities only when we have a problem. But through the pandemic, and particularly for those institutions who have decided to have in-person classes, the facilities organizations and the team of facilities will really reconsider to be a vital role, and the role they play is very crucial to the success of the organization or moving forward in this regard. Thank you.
That's really great. You raised a couple issues there I think we want to take up moving forward. And some of you may notice that you're watching that Jessica is having a little difficulty where she is. So she may be coming and going until she gets settled in, but we're going to keep on pressing forward. One of the things you mentioned, Mohamed, was the issue around space and this question of whether people are reconsidering the role and the value and the cost of space. And I guess I'd like to create some space and time here for maybe Karren and Chris to talk a little bit about the way space is being reimagined on your campuses, or what you're thinking about in that regard.
Yes, thank you. Certainly, SUNY campuses are examining all of their leased space first. They're looking at the leased space because that costs us real money in operating expense, and determining whether or not the changes that have been made in the work from home environment are going to last long enough that they will result in a lower census on campus, therefore not needing all of that additional space. So as part of their continual capital planning process, the campuses are reevaluating capital projects, looking at the lease space, trying to give that up and make changes that will make them more efficient as a result of the things that are going to change as a result of COVID.
And Chris, I mean, 70% of the people in the poll that listeners have been taking were saying that they're thinking that space is going to be a big issue, and that really space reduction maybe or consolidation is a big issue. What's going on in Arizona?
I know we have the challenges that we've all been looking at 2025 as the demographics change from the east. We're a little more fortunate coming out west. Our numbers were not looking as bad as others in terms of enrollment. But with the pandemic, what we have seen though too is our research, which never stopped. We now are just about 99% fully back up in research. And so like the University of Illinois and others, our research, this may be the point in time that we will look back 10, 20 years, like our grandfathers and grandmothers when they went through the Great Depression. And this is what totally pushes us to that next level. The smart building technology, utilizing every square foot. But what we've also seen too, that conversation, should we go online or do we need that brick and mortar buildings? And quite frankly, all of us, we need that connection. We need that physical connection of talking, coming together over a coffee, debating, having good conversations. And that's what we're finding here on campus. Our students want that, our faculty and our researchers. And so in terms of space, yes, we'll analyze it. Yes, we've taken 4 major projects and we postponed those for another 6 months. However, we still see the University of Arizona continuing moving forward and being a leader, and our research is leading the way. Not only the research with the pandemic and our testing that we're just doing wonderful things, our wastewater testing, we have a 3-legged stool with our testing, from testing and treating and wastewater and working with our public health professionals. The space will continue to get analyzed to make sure we're maximizing it, being as optimal and efficient with that as possible. Thank you.
Really awesome. You're talking about the way people collect and collaborate. So much this discussion has happened around the whole notion of the virtual classroom. I guess I'm wondering, are you all thinking about a transformation in the way teaching is happening, a transformation in what the concept of classroom really means going forward? And will there be a mix? Mohamed, I don't know if there's things you're thinking about in terms of classroom use or optimization right now coming out of this experience.
Well, I mean, we all aware of the active learning classroom environment or blended learning. So these 2 concepts have been a new means of pedagogical change in higher education. So we'll see that many of our projects, of our new instruction facilities, would include active learning classrooms where students will be able to collaborate, and it's basically a high technology fitted classrooms where you will be able to exchange ideas and exchange the curriculum. So as I said, it's a pedagogy change on how we teach and how we learn. And from that came the blended learning as well. So you will find a course that where part of it is online and part is in person. So the pandemic has brought to the front of the thinking about the pedagogy and the learning tools and how the new generations will learn is the fact that we really need to expand on this. And that, again, will have an impact on space and the really need for space on campus. And that comes inside with, as we spoke about, the energy and the sustainability aspect. In the university here, we have a zero additional space policy where we try every time we add space to remove space. And the last analysis we performed is about 40% of the space that we have on campus is used for administrative use and or for support use. So we're looking now at those two categories to see, based on the pandemic and what happened here, to see how can we look at that support space or admin space, which is a very large inventory of a percentage. I said about 40%, is how we could optimize that space for the use and how we have a multi-purpose, or how can we convert those spaces, and how we look at instructional spaces in that lens. Thank you.
Do any of you have thoughts about which programs are the most essential to continue in kind of a three-dimensional connected world, and which programs you're talking about that are potential for, I don't know, voted off the island, as it were, and living in a virtual world?
We got to be careful on that. And so, as I mentioned, the research is critical on campus, and that research, looking ahead of just technology, smart technology within our buildings, which we were already talking about that, but now can we elevate that even further? We're working with a number of researchers unfortunately, this may be one of future pandemics. And so when buildings are being designed in the future as fresh air intake, is it 100% coming in? Where folks want to open up windows where you really don't want to be doing that. We need to look at the buildings as a whole, but research will continue to be critical at our university here at the University of Arizona. There's going to be great opportunities for that. And then we'll work with the provost on other areas that may need some adjusting. So thanks.
And where does the student experience play in those prioritization processes? I mean, is that critical to the what stays in core and is an important part of what we call campus?
Well, I'll add to that because yes, it is. The student piece of it is extremely important, the student life piece. But also in terms of classes, SUNY certainly has a lot of workforce development style classes, practicums in the medical field, all of those things that you just have to be physically there in order to do those types of activities. But then that experience, and our students wanted to be on campus. They wanted to have real face time with their professors and their TAs, and they wanted to have real face time with each other where they could interact and do things. And we believe that still is a critical part of university life. It's part of that training of young people to become sort of transformed from being at home where they have their parents sort of guiding them and taking care of them, and then getting out into the world and becoming a productive adult. And related to the remote versus the in-person experience, we think that there's going to be a lot of both. We think that the hybrid mode is going to continue after the pandemic ends, that there'll be those opportunities where I can't get to class. There's been a car accident in the way to school that's going to keep me from getting there on time. I'll take my class remotely this time, but I want those opportunities to be there in person. So we think that we're going to continue to have a lot of that throughout the future.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And Chris, to follow up on that one more time, I was thinking of it, Chris, you've got not only the traditional on-campus students there at the university, but you have a number of tracks of adult learners and remote learners. I suppose that hybrid piece just builds upon some of the things that you've already been doing in terms of supporting that very diverse constituency that many schools are getting into now.
No, it does. And like other universities, this gives us opportunity to expand our online portfolio. But as Karren was mentioning too, with the students, and not just the students, the faculty and staff, we need that collaborative effort in person. And that's really what we're seeing. But quite frankly, you're seeing it throughout the 8 to 9 months of the pandemic. We're all yearning for it. Whether it's a handshake or a hug when you see somebody, whether it's sitting down having a coffee, going over details of an exam, collaboration with other department heads, that is critical, and that's going to continue to be critical. And quite frankly, it's real positive for our universities down the road. The fact that our students, a good portion of our students, over 90%, they wanted to come to campus. When we initially were looking at the financial cliff and how devastating was it going to be, and then as we got closer to opening up, and the amount of students that have come to campus has just been a huge percentage. That speaks very highly of the students. I had an opportunity to meet one of the mothers as we were working on our isolation dorms. And in the very, very beginning, there was a little snafu. I called her up. I was doing a personal phone call, and we turned out to have a half-hour conversation. She's from Kansas. And then when she came into town, I went out with her and her son for a lunch. And she was reviewing and amazed at all the great items that the University of Arizona were doing to take care of our students who are in isolation and the students who are here. And so the mental health of our students is critical. The ability to have our students and our faculty and staff back on campus. Yes, we'll have some through 21 of working from home, but that collaborative effort has never been as great as it is right now. A great connection for all of us.
Yeah, that shout out to that you're making to your own team, it really is something that needs to go out to everybody across the country, because it's been remarkable what schools have been able to do to pull together the experiences that have happened for students this fall. Your comments were a really good segue into a question I had about capital issues, right? And at one point you talked about looking into the future, and I guess I want to pose to all of you, what can you count on? What is stable right now? What are the things, and they could be good things or bad things, right? And what are the things that in your mind right now are issues that form the basis of how you're thinking about capital planning going forward? Mohamed, Karren, whichever one would like to jump in would be fine.
Go ahead, Karren.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a lot that we're looking at, obviously, in HVAC. We're looking at all of the things about the buildings that will make them perform better during a pandemic than what we came into this one with. And, we also look at all of that space, especially the back room type of activities. I have a lot of staff who love the fact that they're working from home and want to continue to work at home. And some of those activities never interact with the students or the faculty or other staff. And so that's going to happen. Therefore, we're going to need less space. And so we have to look at all of that. And we don't know yet what's going to happen in the residence halls and whether or not we're also going to have fewer students living on campus, or the other way, maybe more students that want to live on campus. We just have to see how this goes, and then we have to adapt our capital planning to meet whatever those changes are that are going to happen.
So I do echo that what Karren said, and that what's happening now is you look at the roster of projects you have and your capital plans as you're moving forward, and looking at the space in line of that, and the notion of the student experience and the kind of spaces the students need, and the instructional spaces, and as I mentioned earlier, the idea of the support spaces and the administrative spaces, where obviously we can find that to be an opportunity to reconsider that and look at your investment, even your capital investment in your infrastructure, not necessarily in space, but also your capital finance and your capital investment in your HVAC systems, in your energy production, in your power plants, all of those aspects. So, for example, in conjunction with the pandemic, one of the activities that we needed to undertake, and I, as I said, it was very crucial to this success, is the HVAC and the control review, the heating and ventilation review. In a very short time, we developed a program that it did cost us about $2.5 million. So that was a significant investment of capital at this particular time, but it was serving two folds. It's an upgrade and update of our serving our deferred maintenance, serving our long-term capital need, but in the same time, looking at a worry or as we think of the pandemic and how the virus gets spread and whether it goes through airways or not. So the CDC guidelines were basically to move with the ASHRAE standard 62.1, where we have certain standards about the number of air changes and the amount of fresh air per hour, per person, per student, per person, per square foot. So there was a need for that very crucial program to be run to review all of our buildings. And we have about 2,500 air handling units in the system that needed to be reviewed and to be upgraded in a very short period, looking at the actuators, looking at the control thermostats, the set points, the dampers working, open, close, the coils, the cleaning, the filters, upgrading filters from MERV 11 to MERV 13, all of those aspects. So that was a significant capital investment, and I think as we move forward, we'll look at our capital investment also in that vein, not only space, but also the upgrade of the infrastructure and dealing with our deferred maintenance activities and have those long-term asset management plan really finalized and formalized as we move forward.
It's really interesting. One of those things you guys talked about was sort of the structures, and in the last case, sort of the regulatory sort of requirements to meet certain standards. What about some of the more fluid issues? Questions coming in, things like can you count on faculty continuing to be as flexible and dynamic? Will they start to give up their offices, for example? Or what about students? And you're all smiling at me about faculty being flexible. What about student registrations, right? This concern about meld between this semester and next, and the demographic cliff that was mentioned earlier. What are your thoughts about those as either still too fluid or really possibly kind of boundaries that you're trying to plan around going forward? And I'll take any victim.
So I'll offer up one thing related to the melt and the concern that we have about what's going to happen this year and the whole demographic change. But one of the things that we have to think about is, what about the students who didn't go to school this year because of the pandemic and who therefore just took that gap year? Now they come in next year, assuming that everything is sort of back to normal. And do we all of a sudden actually have an overabundance of students for that year? And how many years does it take to sort of get back to a normal flow because of what has happened for at least this semester and next semester, and who knows if it goes into the fall semester as well?
Yeah, and I'll jump in there. We're anticipating, unfortunately, that through 2021 we'll be dealing with the pandemic. With the vaccines that are getting ready to roll out, we're anticipating those won't come out until mid-year for the group that we're looking at. And your question about faculty, we love our faculty at the University of Arizona, but we also know too the median age where the large spike was 20 to 40-year-olds. That's our student population. And our faculty, our median is 50. And so rightfully concerned with the overall buildings, where they've asked a number of questions. We've talked with our faculty on a routine basis, educating them on our buildings, our HVAC systems. We instituted communication meetings way upstream on a weekly basis with our building occupants, so we could first address the fear and trepidation. And then as the questions would come in, hundreds of questions, and as we continue those meetings on a weekly basis, and when I ask, do we want to continue, it's that communication to our staff, our faculty, and students, so they understand what's going on, whether it's our Greek life, whether it's our students who are in our dorms, whether it's our faculty and staff who are in the building. How are we addressing the COVID? What are we doing to make sure the buildings are safe from a facility standpoint? And how can we continue to educate the users? And how do we use that technology of the future so we can be even more efficient and optimize our building portfolio? And so we anticipate students will be coming back in the spring. Our spring here at the University of Arizona starts in January. And so we're anticipating we've had over 88% of the students who are currently in the dorms will be coming back as of January. Plus we have a new group of students coming in. And so we're looking at continue moving forward on the successes that we've achieved so far.
So if I may add to this one, Pete, again, in terms of the space, is, as I mentioned earlier, the new responsibility central management have brought to colleges. I'm commenting on your question about faculty space or space, right? So colleges now looking very closely at their cost, since space and energy will be included in their budget. So that have facilitated a collaborative approach of looking at how we could look at space and the actual space needs. So there are studies and analysis now being performed, for example, in terms of percentage of square foot per faculty or square foot per student in certain area. There are some metrics and some benchmark being done in order to bring to light through analytics really where we're at, where every college, every department, every unit, either academic unit or administrative units, and that will bring to light how much space we're really occupying or utilizing, and that will provide an opportunity for optimizing these kind of spaces, whether academic or otherwise. But I believe for the near future, as we're moving forward, the focus will be really on the support spaces and the admin spaces, and since we find some low-hanging fruits there in order to be able to optimize these spaces and bring better value to the institution. Thank you.
Really interesting. There's a question here I want to sneak in, coming from a neighbor of yours, Chris, at ASU, asking about outdoor classrooms. And I guess that's an interesting question too. Is the experience with outdoor classrooms affecting people's perception of where they gather and how they teach? And are you thinking about that as you consider folding new ideas into capital planning going forward?
You know, we're always looking at open space, and coming from a University of Michigan, where I worked for about 13 years, and then coming out here to the beautiful Southwest. It's just a gorgeous area. I mean, our weather now, the next 6-7 months is just gorgeous. However, it's a combination, open space, collaborative opportunities for outside, but we're still looking at the traditional classes inside the buildings. And so how do we do that? How do we do that in a successful manner? So it's a combination of both. Our ROTC students naturally are outside. Our dance theaters, they have gone out. We're in the process right now working with our Fine Arts College to go ahead and construct a stage outside as part of their overall learning experience, and then addressing that mental health piece, which is just really, really critical as this pandemic continues going on. We're going to go ahead and construct a stage. It'll be students run constructing it, and then different performances will be done out there with the proper social distancing to really create that positive feel throughout campus. So using a combination of both as we continue moving forward.
And what about up north? Any interest in building more outdoor space now that it's snowing nearby?
Listen, it's 20 below zero up there in Buffalo, right? So Karren, good luck.
It's a challenge.
I won't rub it in.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy solution for New York.
Outdoor spaces, yes. I mean, the weather making a challenge. Before actually I moved to Illinois, I came from McMaster University in Canada, which is even colder, but we did experience with an outdoor space. We did in fact build, develop, construct 2 particular spaces with discussion with faculty to be able to hold for certain programs and around probably biology, nature related, to find those opportunities, and they were utilized. And I believe we do have an opportunity here in Illinois as well. But because of the weather, I believe it will be for, or it is for limited use. So. Okay.
Excellent. All right. In the interest of time, I want to try to move to kind of follow up on a comment or a couple comments you made earlier about this whole notion of the prominence and the visibility of you as facilities leaders, and maybe talk to us a little bit about what that has meant, how it has manifested, and maybe what you intend to do about it going forward, given a stage you may have gotten in the last 9 months that you didn't have before, and maybe talk about whether you do or do not want to give up the stage, I guess is probably that question. Let's start with Chris.
Well, facilities, I've been doing this for quite some time. And as I mentioned, from the University of Michigan to the University of Arizona, we have a great team. We are very proud of our team. We've gotten a number of awards. We're a humble group, but we get these awards for our faculty or for our employees. And the fact is, our staff never in my entire career have our custodial team, our maintenance team, the support team in our warehouse, where we've centralized all the purchasing of the personal protective equipment, the antibody, medical supplies. The team has just worked so hard to take care of this university, keep it safe as essential service employees. And as we now look at going to curfews, mandatory curfews, our staff will still be here. We haven't been working from home. We've been on campus since March, first consolidating students and then the reentry of students, and now looking at the spring reentry. And the fact of our facility staff, as all other panelists have mentioned, we have continued to be elevated. And quite frankly, I'd have to say we have been in the past, but never like this. Facilities, as we're a professional operation, we deal with millions and millions of dollars. We're economists. We have to understand our budgets. We have to understand the human resource side, the collaborative effort. How do you motivate your teams during difficult financial times and good times? Aging infrastructure, how do we handle that? How do we make sure senior leaders, as you have new presidents come in and new chancellors, and the facilities leader has to make sure we understand our operation very well. And this pandemic has shown just how important our facilities management leaders play in keeping our universities up and running, how we work in a collaborative fashion at all times, one team of not only facility staff, but one team of researchers and students. That has elevated our leadership to a very high level in a humble manner. We take a lot of pride in what we do in taking care of our buildings and our campuses, very much so. And so that seat at the table, in the case of our incident command, it only made sense. Who knows the logistical side of our campuses better? And then when I was asked to take over as the commander, of bringing multiple groups together as one to continue the mission of keeping this great campus up and running. And so it's been a great opportunity for our facilities leaders to really showcase the skill and the professionalism that we all have within our industry.
Yeah, Mohamed, you mentioned earlier this issue of rebranding, right? Sort of a new identity. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We, in facilities, what happened here when the pandemic hit, all of us, community and higher education, outside higher education, looked at the pandemic to be a challenge, a huge challenge to face, and how we're going to operate. I was very proud to look at our team in facility service, to look at that as actually, in fact, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to rebrand ourselves, to rebrand the facility services and their contribution to the higher education institution. And as I mentioned earlier, our colleagues in the university would look at, we having a safe environment, we have an environment that is conducive to learning and teaching, we have good indoor environment and outdoor environment and safe, and we remember only facilities when we have issues, when we were cold or hot, and we think that when everything is going normal, that means it's happening by itself. We don't really consider the people that are working hard in the background. So everyone in our 1,200 people of facilities professional working in facilities department here looked at the pandemic to be as an opportunity to showcase what we can do and what we can serve to the organization. I gave the example earlier about the HVAC system and what we've done. There was issues around space. There were lots of questions from the facility community, from the university community, if we will come and work in person, how we will operate. health and safety, social distancing, disinfecting, cleaning, disinfecting, spraying to clean and disinfect 24 hours, and all of those aspects. So there was a lot of professionalism and a lot of professional opportunities and work that was happening in the background to look at even the space in the classroom, lay out the space in the classroom to move from a regular capacity to a COVID capacity. So it was a huge level of work, and I can tell you that the university now look at facilities from a different lens, and we will need to take that forward and move that forward as the department that provide crucial service that help the very core mission of the higher education institution.
Karren, for all of you as leaders, building on those two comments, I guess I'm wondering whether you feel like you're able to show competencies that are maybe even above and beyond the technical sort of sophistication that we're hearing so much about.
Yes, I think that what has shown throughout SUNY, and certainly for me personally within the system administration office, is I'm at a somewhat lower rung than the top executive leadership team, and so was not included in some of those key meetings of that group, but have through COVID all of a sudden been added to that group because it's obvious, I think, to them that I bring more than just knowledge of capital and knowledge of, building maintenance, and that as facilities people, we have this problem solving sort of nature, that we look at things from a lot of different points of view and then look to long-term solutions. And so I've seen that there's been a change in sort of the value that is seen for our group from that aspect. I will say one thing that disappoints me in the overall talk across the world about first responders, healthcare, transportation workers, etc., all of them being recognized as critical in the pandemic, and they just never quite get to that maintenance facilities staff as being as important as we are. And I find that a little disconcerting and wish there was a way to, as Mohamed said, sort of rebrand the critical nature of what we do. I've always said to my staff that you never notice what a janitor does. You only notice what a janitor doesn't do. And so as long as they're doing their job, nobody pays any attention to it. And that's our bane. We have to deal with it. But I do see a lot of improvement, and I like the rebranding idea a lot. We should take advantage of this as we can.
Right. I love the thread through all three of you, because Chris is not the only person who's talked about the fact that suddenly custodians were the most important people on campus, in March, April, right? And it is a chance to really rebrand an identity to move forward into the what we do, not what we don't do kind of relationship that people have with them, which is really pretty interesting. You've all been talking about sort of the details in the big picture. We're getting a bunch of detailed questions I want to segue over for the last few minutes here into a kind of an operational discussion. There are a bunch of people asking about ventilation issues and purification issues and UV systems and technologies. I guess rather than asking for a litany of things, I'm wondering if any of you have something that you feel like is a truism after the last 9 months going forward. Is there some technology you've decided to adopt? Or do you feel like what you were doing was really, really solid and you're just going to double down on it? I'm just curious where you think you are in terms of how people are thinking about this notion of air filtration and purification systems. And whichever of you wants to blurt out an answer, go.
Well, I can tell you very briefly. I know that we're pressured on time here, but what I described earlier in dealing with the HVAC idea, that was after our engineers and our scientists did really research that for quite some time and looked at the CDC guideline and looked at the ASHRAE standard, and we found that the most beneficial and optimized use is to make sure that the HVAC system is operating as it was commissioned, as it was supposed to be functioning and providing the fresh air. So there was a lot of measurements and a lot of verifications to ensure that our 2,000 air handling units are operating functionally. So that's what we've done, and we made the necessary adjustment, and moving forward will ensure that happen. Also upgrading the filters from MERV 11 to MERV 13. That also did help a lot, but we have to do that with caution to ensure that we are not causing other harm in terms of the indoor environment, humidity levels, and so on. We made available as well some HEFF vacuums. They are quite noisy, really. So, but we bought some of those, and we made them available for our colleagues who would like to use them in addition on top do, and that was used as it was applicable. So that was the extent of our work in our area.
I would add in there, because we're doing the similar what Mohamed's doing. We've analyzed all our buildings for fresh air intake, all our classrooms. Where can we increase mechanically where it's feasible? The MERV filters, which is a challenge because we're all trying to get them. We now are in the process, though, of analyzing, working with researchers actually out of UK. And there's a substance that the Navy SEALs, they use on their outfits when they're in some really bad water that can contaminate them. We're doing that test on our filters, and we could use MERVs or use filters that are 7 and 8s, not go through that expense where we increase over $200,000-$300,000 in the delta between the two. And so we'll have that result back here in the next month or so. And then we could share it with all the listeners too, because if that's an opportunity that's cost effective, as we look at this, we can go ahead and scale back and not have to get these MERV 13s, continue using the 7 and 8s. That's going to be a cost-effective opportunity.
Excellent. We really do only have a couple of minutes, and we talked about 1,000 things we could discuss in the next 3 or 4 minutes. I guess I wanted to ask all of you your thoughts about operationally the challenge of optimizing expenses, right, and trying to find new revenue streams. Most of you are, like the rest of the country, facing budget constraints and challenges. Are there any particular things? One, what is your confidence around the budgets ever coming back or restoring themselves? But maybe more importantly, what are some of the key things that you're trying to explore right now to kind of optimize the use of your operating budgets? And maybe Karren, you want to take a shot since you were the most emotive in reacting?
Yeah, so, that's a challenge because we have not heard yet even what our budget cut is for this year. We start in July with our budget. And we don't know this year's budget because the state doesn't have its budget really worked out because the feds haven't really figured out what they're going to do for the states. And so it's a real challenge, and everybody's just looking at everything they can do. In New York, the difficulty is we are a union state. And at this point in time, we have not been given approval to do any layoffs or any furloughs. So without that, it's very difficult to make major types of cuts. So it's the standard things of not backfilling vacancies, no promotions, no new hires. Right now, that's what we're looking at. But we are looking at whether or not there are technology things that we can do that will help us in the future to streamline our overall expenses.
We have, in 10 seconds, I can tell you that we have been already asked to cut by 2.5% for this fiscal year we're in right now, which was approved last July. So we're cutting 2.5%. We're also asked to plan for our next year for 5% cut. So it's 2.5 plus 5. And so we're working on that. We're always looking for different ways. So that will be, again, an opportunity to look at our service levels, to reprioritize our services. And we have been doing that already in the lens of the pandemic. We've been looking at that, and an opportunity to optimize our workforce, look at the talent, the acquisition of talents, what kind of new expertise that we will need. So as we move forward, we'll be looking at this. There's a lot of things, but I know that we're tight on time, so I don't want to elaborate the point here.
Yeah.
And I would wrap this part of the conversation up that, the fact is, how do you continue to make facilities management viable in the age of COVID? And understanding all your metrics, understanding our utility economists, understanding our staffing levels, all our resources, and running them as optimal and efficient as possible is critical. So thanks.
So Michael, I think you have the focus for another topic. We have a whole list of operational issues around data and people, and there's a
I think we could just wrap up because I think you guys covered everything in this hour. So I think we could sign off early. And is it happy hour yet or no? No. Thank you guys, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for an awesome panel here. And thank you particularly, Pete, for moderating this. It was a lot to go through. You did a masterful job. And for those that logged in a little bit late, again, welcome. If you have not already, make sure you just go up to the top right-hand corner and update your profile to put the institution that you're with. We see a lot of great comments in the chat and a lot of great interactions going on. So that's great. We want to see that continue to happen there. But it's also important that people know who you are and which institution you're representing. So if you haven't done that, make sure you do it. So thank you all for kicking off HEFFv here. And we'll do a little summary of this. We're going to attempt to do a summary of this for the blog coming up. I don't know, it may have to be a multi-part thing, but thank you so much for joining us.